The Superconscious and Spirituality, the Big Questions series. Is there a detached spiritual? Welcome to a joint videocast of my Patheos and New Generations Explore Faith article series, The Big Questions, and my Substack, Our Times Today and Tomorrow series on spirituality. Spirituality, since the 11th century, has been acknowledged as the proximate or near-at-hand spirituality, mostly involving our relationships. But it also involves gaining insight from the detached spiritual through the superconscious. Or does it? Well, we'll look at that. The superconscious is defined as transcending human consciousness. The superconscious is defined as transcending human consciousness, of, relating to, or possessing the highest consciousness. The American Psychological Association defines superconsciousness as a higher state of awareness that is associated with creative inspiration, spiritual insight, and the attainment of peak experiences. That's from the APA Dictionary of Psychology. Wikipedia says it is able to acquire knowledge through non-physical or psychic mechanisms and pass that knowledge to the conscious mind. Also, awareness of the inner core of one's existence, that is, one's self or identity. An example of superconscious is when we see, hear, or experience something. It lodges in our consciousness and sparks a creative idea, which leads to a new product, a new way of thinking about things, and some call that reframing. We also experience this as a better sense of how what we do impacts others, and as a deeper felt connection with others, the universe, and God. Is there evidence for a spiritual world detached from our body, requiring transcendence to communicate with it? And even more importantly, can we rely on what we find? So let's look at that, because it's very important to understand this, whether or not it really exists. Communicating could be something as simple as language, to represent ideas from the world. While that is very real and comprehensive for the proximate spiritual, that's near-at-hand spiritual, it doesn't get to the point of a detached spiritual that is reached without uttering a word, even in cyberspace. Let's use the scientific method for proof of the spiritual world. In both my Patheos and Substack articles posts, I've tried to put the spiritual on firm footing so it's not something spooky and without merit. I began with solid research explaining how the mind operates from a scientific perspective and what we know about conscience from science. I looked at how words and ideas work in the mind. I'm trying to separate the objective aspects from the subjective. Objective aspects can be tested scientifically. Subjective content varies from person to person. I like to start with something funny, but I didn't find any funny quotes about the superconscious, which makes me very suspicious right from the start. Having no sense of humor is never good. I like the Buddha because he is always pictured smiling. Jesus only smiles on TV. Many famous scientists viewed religion favorably but skeptically. Stephen Hawking eventually concluded that science doesn't leave a space for God. The Big Bang was an inevitable consequence of the laws of physics. But Hawking left us hanging. We need a psychic to contact him and find out who created the laws of physics. There you go. I found some humor. Anyway, I found this quote from writer and spiritual teacher Florence Scovel Shinn on Quote Mantra, which I think puts this in perspective. Change your thoughts, and in the twinkling of an eye, all your conditions change. Your world is a world of crystallized ideas, crystallized words. Sooner or later, you reap the fruits of your words and thoughts. I like to think I'm an original thinker, but I'm always surprised when someone like Florence had these thoughts in the 1800s. It seems eventually we all walk the same spiritual paths. Science does a similar thing with math. Math isn't a scientific reality, it's a human construct used for representation of the physical world. It works so far to prove things don't exist. Well, it's interesting. I love this methodology. I have an agreement with alligators that we don't eat each other. It's worked so far. I have a no elephant sign on my front yard. So far, that's worked. I haven't seen any vampires, so I'm pretty sure their absence means that silver gets rid of them. Well, this is amusing, but it illustrates that scientific reasoning sometimes relies on negatives. The fallacy is you can't prove a negative. In scientific thought, science doesn't measure anything spiritual, therefore science says it doesn't exist. Case closed. There's nothing here to think about. See, there are no unicorns. Oh wait, here comes a virgin riding one now. It's an Arabian oryx. From the side, its two thorns look like one, and it really resembles a unicorn. Trailing behind her are 8 other animals with one horn. I really wish she hadn't brought a rhinoceros, even if the extinct one from Asia really resembles modern conceptions of a unicorn. By the way, it's not really a snuggly creature. So let's talk about disproving science, because this could be fun. Superstring proof. No evidence exists to prove or disprove it. Black hole proof. Scientists infer the presence of black holes and study them by detecting their effect on nearby matter. Could it maybe be the Great Bear constellation playing with us? Dark matter proof. Scientists believe this material makes up more than 1/4 of the universe, but it can't be directly seen or felt. Its existence is inferred by gravitational impact. I love inferences. Dark energy proof. Dark energy hasn't been directly observed or measured. Instead, scientists can only make inferences about it from its effects on the space and matter we can see. Again, with the inferences. Wormhole proof. Einstein's theory of general relativity mathematically predicts the existence of wormholes, but none have been discovered to date. I'm not sure that any scientist takes wormholes seriously, but they are a lot of fun in fiction. Is the universe infinite or just very big? Ever more powerful telescopes show the boundary is farther and farther away, and each new observation makes the universe older than currently thought. How long does a proton live? Depends on whether it's a trade name or subatomic particle. Scientists don't know. We have all heard a lot about superstring theory, black holes, dark matter, and dark energy. None of them are proven to actually exist. Their existence is supported mathematically and inferred from their effect on other things in the universe. So, lacking direct evidence, I've proven that they don't exist, no matter what scientists choose to believe. But unicorns do exist. This is fun, but I've poked enough fun at science. Actually, I have a lot of respect for scientists, and I really like scientists, especially theoretical science. I hope all of these theories are true. Is it even possible to transcend the physical universe? Over the century, mystics, psychics, and individuals have sensed the great beyond. Religious organizations always view their messages with skepticism, but can't negate them. Religion is about beliefs and praxis to help and guide individuals. The spiritual is about the individual's meaning and purpose. Both have their place and don't negate each other. Some churches even encourage prophecy with mixed results. We like to have proof. We like to know we're not being spoofed by some lunatic. We would like the subjective to be objective. What is proof of the spiritual? What would it take to prove that the detached or transcendental spiritual exists and that people communicate with it? From science's point of view, spooky quantum entanglement is proven with photons, electrons, and even small diamonds. It's interesting that when particles are entangled and separated, what happens to one also happens to the other. Quantum entanglement means that aspect of one particle in an entangled pair depends on aspects of the other particle. This is regardless of how far apart they are or what lies between them. The relationship illustrates that there is somehow communication or other form of connectedness between the two particles. This is still considered a correlation, not a cause and effect relationship, but the correlation is consistent. At most, fundamental science has shown that all particles and all energy are produced by waves. Quantum mechanics, which includes entanglement, works on any size object. However, classical physics is generally used for objects larger than a few particles. There is some research suggesting that people may also be entangled. I get entangled with my wife, and the outcome is rarely pleasant. The power of prayer or positive thoughts to cure disease or hold it at bay was explored in an NPR broadcast, Can Positive Thoughts Help Heal Another Person? The findings were that those who prayed for their own diseases were more likely to be healed. The scientific evidence in the study was the absence of viral and bacterial pathogens. One indication that remote prayer or other forms of alternative medicine are helpful is simply that many of those receiving treatments feel better. From the National Institutes of Health, which is a government organization, and Science Direct is the article, Does a Form of Entanglement Between People Explain Healing? An examination of hypotheses and methodology, and Does the Form of Entanglement Between People Explain Healing? An examination of hypotheses and methodology. In general, scientific studies on prayer for others continue to be inconclusive. I made a study of many studies showed no discernible benefit, but these studies focus on different things. For example, a Mayo Clinic study focused on outcomes after cardiovascular surgery. It indicated that prayer by others was not helpful. A more focused double-blind study on 3,393 patients with blood infections showed the significant results of a shorter stay in hospital and shorter duration of fever in patients with a bloodstream infection. Researchers concluded this study should be considered for use in clinical practice. This is from National Institutes of Health, the article Effects of Remote Retroactive Intercessory Prayer on Outcomes in Patients with Bloodstream Infection, randomized controlled trial. Prayer may work better on living things like viruses and bacteria. Prayer may work better on living things like viruses and bacteria. This is exemplified by both those reported by NPR on suppressing or curing their own disease through prayer, and by this study on blood infections. Better studies on prayer need to be done. Is there proof of transcendence by physics? While some don't believe psychic phenomena exist, or don't want to believe it, the CIA and the U.S. foreign militaries used it effectively for many years. Some remote viewing psychics had consistent accuracy above 90%. Some were used for beneficial purposes, such as finding missing people. From the University of California is the article, An Assessment of the Evidence for Psychic Functioning. Is remote viewing and other psychic phenomena useful? Following the frauds of the 1800s and 1900s who purported to contact dead relatives, or who used sleight of hand to make things look like they were real, we should be very skeptical. However, it is important not to throw out the good with the bad. The question hanging over remote viewing isn't that it's possible, but is it useful? By useful, we mean that we can make decisions based on it. It's a subjective experience. Military and CIA leaders want high confidence levels, and not everyone with those abilities can deliver it. But most people can develop these abilities to some extent. Generally, it's found that multiple viewers give better results. See the article Stock Market Prediction Using Associative Remote Viewing by Inexperienced Remote Viewers, Background and Motivation. Since the stock market usually goes up and people are generally optimistic, this makes these results questionable. More certainty is provided by the book The Alexandria Project. This book details the results of 5 universities and organizations' efforts to determine if remote viewing in archaeology works. They began by having several people from different locations independently create remote viewing maps of where archaeological ruins might be located. Using the combined results, they had excellent findings. And they even took one remote viewer with them and asked him to locate unknown ruins. He referred to a barren location, took them there, and said if they dug there, they would find a wall. They did, and found even more. People who remember past lives are another indicator of getting information in some way that isn't possible in the real world. People with these experiences simply don't have access to that information. But when checked, the person and environment they remembered is found to exist. This is reported in the University of Virginia School of Medicine, children who report memories of previous lives. A large number of people describe communication with loved ones they are separated from, especially at the time of traumatic events. It isn't just twins who do this. Many report seeing loved ones. Most don't report it openly for a variety of reasons, like people are going to think they're crazy. Let's look at near-death experience. Another significant area of confirmation of a connection beyond this world is near-death experiences, abbreviated NDEs. A lot of people talk about NDEs, but they don't talk about what is really an NDE. We don't know what happens in the brain at death. Death is defined as the heart stops and can't be resuscitated, which ironically isn't the medical definition of life, which is brain activity. This is confusing. Anyway, does all brain activity stop at death? I know of one man who accidentally hit a power line with an aluminum ladder, electrocuting him. He turned to his father and said, "I'm dead." And he was. It takes a moment after your heart stops for brain activity to cease. Doctors know that after 40 seconds, the overwhelming majority of neural activity in the brain ceases. The thinking region of the brain, or the cerebral cortex, slows down and flatlines, but brain cells in some parts of the brain may still be active or minimally active. Consciousness ceases at this point. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain active during consciousness. This is the prefrontal and posterior occipital cortices and the colostrum. And this is the first to stop during death. But other areas of the brain, such as those that recognize speech, may not yet be inactive. People report hearing conversations in medical facilities during resuscitation when they're not conscious. The brain's survival mechanism may still be active and trying to revive the body. Spikes in brain activity occur, and the messenger chemicals are often released during the first few minutes of dying. But this doesn't result in consciousness. This partial activity may be responsible for people remembering conversations during near-death experiences. But, and this is a big but, people often see things that could not be visible to them during these experiences, and these items or people are confirmed later to have been present but were completely out of the field of view of the person, such as on top of a cabinet. Now, I'm not talking about people on top of a cabinet. People in the outside hall, and things or people in waiting rooms. Skeptical doctors are commonly won over when they have these experiences, and also by reports from people seeing or knowing things that were impossible for them to observe but were confirmed. There are hundreds of those reports from those who have literally died in the hospital, had no brain activity for over 7 minutes, and then come back with complete stories of seeing things in this world that were impossible to see or hear, and reports from visiting heaven and seeing spiritual leaders like Jesus or the Big Three. Usually these reports from the next world are subjective and based to some extent on the person's religion. This makes them subjective. But the information they retain doesn't necessarily support their religious beliefs. While some receive confirmation, others receive entirely new information. People who have had this experience are usually affected in beneficial ways. Let's talk about altered states. Drug-induced states may be another clue to how such encounters as NDEs can help change us. Studies have shown that the mushroom psilocybin can be used therapeutically to relieve symptoms of treatment-resistant depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, fear and anxiety, and other mental health disorders. Refer to University Hospitals, Magic Mushrooms, Psilocybin, and Mental Health. Some psychedelic drugs, usually from mushrooms, have given people a God encounter. Around 75% of people having this experience report the experience as among the most meaningful and spiritually significant in their lifetime, attributing it to positive changes in life satisfaction, purpose, and meaning. Refer to experiences of ultimate reality or God confer lasting benefits to mental health. We should give due respect to skeptics and proof. Skepticism is healthy. We shouldn't be gullible, and we should look for explanations for things that happen. We shouldn't just jump on the "it was supernatural" or "it could have been done this way" bandwagons. As NASA is finding about unidentified objects that fly, or only around 2% defy reasonable explanation, and they are looking for better tools for investigating these rather than stating they don't exist. Many skeptics do nothing more than sow doubt. They say, "it could have happened this way," but don't bother to prove it. The CIA came to this same conclusion about skeptics' criticism of psychic abilities. On the one hand, we have skeptics who couldn't possibly believe in anything not easily measured by scientific instruments. We also have those who find reason within their religion to ignore these things. Nothing will ever convince them because they've already proved a negative in their minds. They shouldn't believe in black holes or dark matter either because there is even less evidence for them. On the other hand, we have definitive and repeatable proof of many psychic experiences which satisfy many knowledgeable researchers and scientists who design experiments that can't be confounded. In conclusion, we know that what we call the superconscious exists. There is some mechanism by which consciously or subconsciously we can be in contact with other people during times of extreme trauma. In addition, we can have psychic experiences either spontaneously or on demand. We might even have near-death experiences in which we see and hear things and get enlightening information from a world beyond this one. We might be profoundly changed by these experiences. What matters to me is the realization that we are three-dimensional beings. First, we are physical beings connected to a physical world and operating as a brain and body. This focuses on survival and a related trait, dominance. Add to this empathy. Empathy seems to be an innate trait, although for some it seems to be only learned. Second, we are spiritual beings in our proximate spiritual environment. People create the spiritual world around them from their thought processes in what we choose to emphasize, create, and share. Our proximate spiritual world is our relationship with others and our environment. Third is the superconscious. The evidence is that we can contact what is detached from us by time and distance, and even contact the next world. Our spiritual world is very complex. Human relations are at the forefront of our thoughts after survival and meeting our needs. We establish relationships with others in many ways. We establish relations by ensuring there is justice in this world. That is, we create laws to prevent harm, to be remedial, and to some extent compensational to make people whole after crimes or other unfair events. Included in the spiritual are ideas of creativity, beauty, and entertainment, which change over time and is a reflection of us. We form economic systems to ensure people aren't estranged from making a living and to create a fair playing field among businesses. We educate people so that they can survive and thrive in this world, as well as compete. We allow free expression of religion so that each person has free expression in their relationship with God or religious practices. All of these things I've mentioned, and many others, reflect higher values that aren't tied to dirt and concrete, the physical sciences, and have been defined as spiritual since the 11th century. As Jesus said about the commandments, the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. In other words, Jesus said Judaism puts God first and just as importantly includes our relationships with other people. The entire Bible is based on this. This is reflected just as well in other religions and other societies. We aren't limited to our proximate spiritual world within and expressions of it in our behavior and relationships. There is the detached spiritual world. It's a world of ideas we may find compelling. We consider compelling ideas and then change ourselves or our world. It isn't through meditation that we enter the detached spiritual world. Meditation generally enables the discovery of new things through personality integration, which integrates past knowledge and experiences into new realizations. In the detached spiritual world, we may find information that is completely new. Many find that by eating certain mushrooms or having near-death experiences, they experience profound change and gain new meaning and purpose in their lives. Is there reliability in the spiritual world? I've never said that the spiritual world is reliable for making decisions. It's considered subjective, not objective. The Apostle Paul warned, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist." The Antichrist is opposite of Christ, devoid of love and good works. I believe that part of the spiritual world is a land of ideas. They are there for us to prove or disprove, and some are misleading. Jesus represented the way of God, which is love. Ideas that counter love may be charming, but they lead in the wrong direction. So dabbling in the spiritual world takes a great deal of discernment. Discernment means the ability to perceive, understand, and judge things clearly, especially those that are not obvious or straightforward. I know people who are amazingly spiritual in their thinking and seem closely attuned to God, yet I don't think they were always right. But neither am I. The over 2,000 Christian denominations, plus the huge number similarly reflected in Hinduism, over 12 in Islam, and at least 5 major Jewish sects with multiple denominations, indicate that no one has a handle on objective information. We are all subjective in our beliefs, trying to understand God in different aspects. I like to ask in my Patheos column, what does this mean to us? Is it all just hot air, or can we really use this information? In my Our Times Today and Tomorrow Substack column, I like to ask each person to think about probability and potential spaces in which we can grow. Probability spaces means that conditions are right for something to happen or come into being. Potential spaces means that we have an area to grow into that is undefined. We're missing something, but we don't know what. Spirituality is a reality. It's about things we can use, enables both probabilities and potential space in which to grow. To both followers, I present the following question. How can we be more discerning about the spiritual world? It's a subjective experience that can be very helpful or maybe can be misleading. If we pursue it, and I'm not sure we can avoid pursuing it if it's done subconsciously, how can we make sure we are finding helpful things? I like to close with the thought, our answer is God. God's answer is us. Together we make the world better. To explain that, in other words, we turn to God for answers. And we are thoroughly embroiled in this world of people, their relationships, their difficulties, their pursuits, and growth. God hears us, and God answers us. And God's answer is, we have a profound responsibility to others given to us by God to work with others in a loving way for better outcomes. That's it for today. And I have a very busy summer ahead, so these articles, posts, and videocasts will likely be sparse. But we'll talk about more concrete issues that we can deal with from a spiritual point of view. Links for this videocast are in the corresponding articles. Links to the articles are in the YouTube description for this videocast. If you found this article challenging, I've done my work. Please subscribe. Shout out to composer Quintus Moriera for his Little Samba, which I use as theme music for podcast, and also to composer Aaron Kenny for his music Love Letters, which I use as background music.